Hello, welcome to my bookshelf, and today I'll be giving you my review of Anthem by Ayn Rand. If you don't know, this is more or less a novella. It's pretty short, it's only 105 pages. It kind of reads like a long short story in that aspect. And it really is just about this dystopian society. Everything that you do in the society is for the betterment of the entire group, the entire brethren. You don't do anything exclusively for yourself or even by yourself. You're supposed to do everything as a group for the betterment of the whole. It's kind of this collectivist extremism that's kind of been taken over society, and it's kind of the prevalent idea of the land is that the individual is not important at all. And in fact, doing things exclusively for yourself is actually evil and bad. So a very stifling environment to live in, but that's where our main character finds himself. And it really is just kind of his journey in kind of going against that. And that's told right away in the book. The author takes a lot of time and effort in exploring this world. So since I've already started talking about one of the categories, let's jump into my rating scales. So I've recently decided to kind of break down my ratings into different categories, rate them separately, and then average them together to get an overall star rating for the book. I think it makes it just a little bit more scientific in nature instead of an arbitrary star rating. So the first category being writing. And I've talked about this a little bit already, but I think that the writing is very concise and every single sentence has a purpose and a meaning, and it adds to the story in some way, either the plot or the overall themes of the book. Everything is important in the book, and there's a lot of world building that gets done. There's a lot of really interesting things that this book talks about as far as, you know, the setup of this society, but I ended up giving the writing 4 out of 5 stars because I think that while it does a pretty good job in the small space that we're given, I think that if the author would have allowed this to be more fleshed out, it would have, you know, made the story a better one and a more engaging story, because at this point we have a lot of like interesting notes about the society and interesting rules. Like for instance, like you can only talk to people that do the same kind of job that you do. You're not allowed to talk to people outside of that except at very specific meetings. You can only talk to people of your own gender. You can't talk to the opposite gender unless you're at the mating ceremony and you're paired up with someone. Like you don't have a choice in who you're mating with. There's a lot of really interesting things, but they're kind of throwaways. And so we get a decent sense of what this society is like, but it's not completely fleshed out. Part of this is probably because it is so short, but I mean, that's the author's choice. Like, it didn't have to be, and I think that, again, the story would have benefited much more if it was more fleshed out and we got a better sense of what the everyday looks like in this society. So it's just a little bit lacking, but it's not horrible. So I gave it 4 stars as far as the writing goes. There's a lot of really interesting writing choices that I definitely get behind that really help the author say a lot without saying a lot, in the sense that the pronouns I and me are not present until very late in the story, because in the society those concepts and those words don't exist because it's all about the collective and the group as a whole. So the individual person, it is non-existent, more or less. Like, you're only a cog in the machine and you're not a person, really, not in the society. You're not valued as an individual person, so I and me are irrelevant. You don't do anything just for yourself, so it doesn't even make sense to talk about it. So that's really interesting, and that was the choice that, again, it helps you get into this world, and it really helps you just like get some kind of inkling of what this would be like to genuinely think this way. So that was a really good writing choice that the author uses right off the bat. And then, you know, by the end of the story, when we do get I for the first time, it's a very different feel from the rest of the book, and it's a very empowering moment for our main character to learn this word and to finally have this in his vocabulary. it's a very liberating moment for him, and it's more impactful because of this writing decision that the author made. Okay, and the next category is character development. I would say that the main character is pretty decently fleshed out. We get the entire story through his perspective, so that makes sense. We get a pretty good sense of how he feels about the society and how that slowly changes as the book goes on. Yeah, we get a pretty good sense of who the main character is throughout the book, so that was wonderful. But I couldn't give this a super high rating because literally everyone else is so underdeveloped. Now, part of this I think is a writing choice because, like I said, there is no individual, so it makes sense that the author isn't going to focus on like individuality and the uniqueness of each person to the normal extent that a book would, because of, you know, this societal ideal that the individual is not important. So that makes sense, but I couldn't quite get behind that completely because there is another character that at the end of the book willingly defies society on her own, and she meets up with the main character at some point, and she is just so bland, so bland. She absolutely adores our main character, but there's like no development on that at all. It's just there, and it kind of reminds me of like very stereotypical like gender roles, and our author is a woman, so it kind of throws me off too, but admittedly this was written in 1938, so it was a very different time. But I was just so disappointed that she had zero personality, and I mean, maybe it's a product of its time, but it's still, I can't give it a high rating because of that. I really can't. So I give it 3 stars because our main character is decently fleshed out, but no one else is, even the character that actually should be, that would make sense like in this world. So I can't give it a pass on that. Or I mean, the author had an opportunity to flesh out a different character and we didn't get it. And it fell so flat for me. And I think part of it is because I am a modern reader. Like, we have so many amazing female characters nowadays, and she is just so bland and so ugh. I did not like her at all. Even just like as a story character, like she's just so underused. She's proven herself that she's, you know, she's definitely has some daring and courage. But then when she meets up with the main character, it's like she loses that, and she's just kind of like a mindless robot to just follow anything he does or says. Disappointed in that. So characters, 3 out of 5 stars. Not so great. Moving right along, the next category is theme. This was a little tricky for this book just because of the nature of the book, and it's pretty short, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But at the same time, our author is very dedicated in a lot of writing choices to kind of get her theme across. And it's very potent, very evident throughout. Like I said, pretty much everything in here is to get the theme across and kind of show you the horrors of this extreme collective ideal. And I think where it falls flat for me personally, this is just my personal opinion, is I think when a main character kind of comes to the realization that the society he grew up in was not so great, and he starts to kind of come up with his own ideals, I think his ideals are just so extreme in the other direction that it's just like too much for me to like fully get behind personally. So like that, I just couldn't get on board. So that to me brought down, I guess, the theme points. I don't know. I like the idea of empowerment and having this personal strength and being your own unique person. Like, that's a great theme and a great message, but it takes it to such an extreme where I'm like, no, that's going past the line of like what's acceptable to me. But also there's a passage I want to read that takes it to an extreme that I just personally, for my own beliefs, like I cannot get behind. So this is him. He's just found out the word I, and so he's using it a lot, and he's really excited, and he's writing about his new feelings and his new thoughts about how he thinks the world should work and all that kind of stuff. So this is maybe his anthem, I don't know, but At some point he says this: I am done with the monster of we, the word of serfdom, of plunder, of misery, falsehood, and shame. And now I see the face of God, and I raise this God over the earth, this God whom men have sought since men came into being, this God who will grant them joy and peace and pride, this God, this one word, I. And to me, that's taking it way too far. Like, he has just put the individual person to the level of what God should be. And he literally uses the word God multiple times. So yeah, he takes it a bit to an extreme. Like, people are not gods. Like, we're really important. We have just inherent dignity and respect that people should, appreciate and honor for all of us, but we are not gods. And I think that's an important distinction. That this character he just jumps right over the ideal, and he just jumps way too high. See, and here's the thing too, like, I wouldn't have minded it so much if the book continued and that did happen, where he did realize that, okay, maybe I've taken this to an extreme and I've learned my lesson, that kind of thing. But this story doesn't last that much longer after this whole declaration. It more or less ends on that note, and that's kind of like, this is the ultimate revelation of the book that we're trying to give to you. And I'm like, no. So, to me personally, I just can't get behind this theme and this message completely. It has some good points, but it takes it too far. So, that's just my personal opinion. So, ultimately, I gave the theme 4 out of 5 stars. I think that the author did a great job of including it throughout. It's very present, completely, like, through every single sentence, it seems to be pretty present. And the last category is enjoyability. So because of all the things I've mentioned before and why I didn't give like 5 out of 5 stars on any category, there were problems that I had with this book, which, obviously brought down my enjoyability level. That's just how it goes. So, I mean, I didn't hate this book at all. I thought it was a somewhat enjoyable read, but it wasn't amazing. Like, it didn't take it to the next level to me. It was just kind of, I don't want to say basic, but kind of basic. Like, it was an interesting story. I'm, glad I read it, but it's not something that I would, like, highly recommend to anyone. Like, if this sounds interesting, like, yeah, go ahead, read it. I mean, it's only 105 pages. It's not a huge commitment, so that's good. It's a very easy read, very straightforward, very simple. Like, I mean, the story's very simple. And it's meant to be, because, like, she's trying to say a certain thing, and she definitely gets that message across. Like I said, don't fully get behind it, but she does a really good job with what she's trying to say. But yeah, I just personally couldn't fully enjoy it, but it was definitely an interesting read. I definitely was engaged in the story and I wanted to know what happened next, but it didn't ultimately live up to what I was hoping it would be or what it could have been. So 3 out of 5 stars on enjoyability for me. And now, if you total up my scores, and you average it up together, you get an overall star rating of 3.5 stars for Anthem. It does well in some aspects, but it doesn't do anything amazingly. It doesn't knock anything completely out of the park. It's just okay. Alright, so that is my book review of Anthem. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are, because as you can see, I'm kind of torn about this book. It's just not something I completely enjoy, but I'd be curious to see what you thought if you really did enjoy this book. Please let me know what you thought and what made this a stellar read instead of just an average one for me. So please let me know in the comments, and as always, thank you for watching my video, and until next time.